It's the Nilon Report with Susan Nilon. You want to talk to Susan? Just call her at 373-1220. That's 373-1220. Here's Susan.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Nilon Report. My name's Susan Nilon in the studio of WSRQ Radio, where I'm here every day, Monday through Friday at 5 o'clock, talking about really good stuff. In fact, today I'm excited. We have a very special show. I have with me Yaël, Ossowski. He is with the Florida Watchdog, and there was a bill that was passed just, I think, a couple days ago, that actually Senator Marco Rubio and Senator Bill Nelson came together on, and it happens to be warrantless wiretapping. We're going to be covering that today. I think it's a really important issue. I think that we need to stay abreast of all this stuff. And why you think that, this is great, something that they both came together on. We need to find exactly what it is that they came together on it and why. And we're going to be talking with Yaël to find out more background information behind it. Also today, I'm going to be doing some giveaways. If you've been listening for the past couple of days, we are going to be broadcasting the East-West Shriners game coming up on January 19th. I think the kickoff is about 4 o'clock. It's up at the Tropicana Field. We are going to be there. We've been giving a ton of tickets. I'm going to be giving them away, a 4-pack away today, so stay tuned for that. And a couple other event notices that we're going to talk about during the course of the hour. Anyway, I want to let you know right now, I would like to welcome Yaël Ossowski with us. He's with Florida Watchdog, and he's written an article. He's the Florida Bureau Chief, and his article is appeared on the Florida Watchdog site, and I'd like to welcome him to our program. How are you?
Quite well. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me on.
Absolutely. It took us a second to bring on your mic. I apologize for that. Okay, so Yaël, I think the first thing that we need to do is give a description about this bill and what this entails. It stems from the Patriot Act that was created during the George Bush administration, but take us a little further in what this bill entails.
Sure. It is the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. Now, an original version of this bill was passed in 1978, passed by Democrat Jimmy Carter, and this was a way for the government to try to keep tracks on so-called terrorist groups all across the world. And this is a power that you needed a warrant, and the court was set up. That is, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court was set up in order to review the warrants and to make sure everything was okay. This was all right for about 25, 30 years until 9/11. And at that point, that is when, as you stated before, the Patriot Act was signed, everything was put together, and it gave the government unprecedented power to listen in on phone conversations. Now, really, the conversation about what this really means in today's world in 2013 is encompassed in the bill that was passed in 2008. That was the bill that was just extended over the Christmas break. Now, we're talking not just a few days ago, but this was perhaps, I think, the 30th of December is when this was passed by the Senate. And this gives sweeping authority to the NSA and the FBI if they would like to listen in on a phone conversation between an American and an agent of a foreign power. Now, there have been a lot of court cases about this, about who is an agent of a foreign power. What if two U.S. citizens are calling each other? Does the government have the authority to listen in without a warrant? That's always the I would say the way that they have to look at this argument is, do they need a warrant or not? Now, the Fourth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution says that they need a warrant for reasonable search and seizure, and that's really what's being addressed in this bill.
All right. Well, one of the things that you caught me on was the term an agent of foreign power. What determines an agent of foreign power, and who determines that?
Now, so far there have been about 5 Supreme Court decisions that have tried to answer that very question. A lot of the times, what it's come down to is if the agency, that being the FBI or the NSA, has probable cause to believe that there is one person on a phone communication that could be considered a person of interest or could have connections to a foreign power, then therefore they have the authority to listen in without a warrant.
But isn't probable cause determined by a judge?
Probable cause in this case is written up by the different executive agencies. Now, that is something that, of course, is being argued about. But the entire point is that the Senate recently came together and gave yet another carte blanche, yet another renewal of this bill originally passed again in 1978, but then renewed again and again and again. And this time we have it for another 5 years until 2017.
Okay, but this bill that originally started in 1978 is really not the same bill that they signed into law again right now, correct?
Yes, that is 100% correct.
Okay, so so to say that there's a history that long, and the reason I'm pointing this out is because there are a lot of our listeners are going, well, wait, we've been using this for generations, for several decades now. It's been fine. Why, of course, wouldn't we then continue it on? What are the problems? And I want to make people aware that there are inherent problems that were changed right after, as Yaël said, right after 9/11. And the concern is the number one key is that you don't have to have a warrant anymore for this, correct?
Yes, that's the whole point is that when we look at I guess the most interesting prism to look at this through is the Senate amendments that were put to this bill. Now, the two main opponents of the FISA Act, as it is called now, are Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky and Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon. And they both offered amendments essentially saying the same thing, saying that you would not use this program as a means of listening in on American citizens without a warrant. And Rand Paul's amendment actually went up and it said you will not violate the Fourth Amendment through this bill. Now, obviously, the Senate came together and voted both of those amendments down and passed it overwhelmingly. So we can tell really where the interest in the Senate lies.
Well, okay, and I have a lot of questions, and I know we got to go to break. But quickly, though, to put an amendment that basically is opposite of what the actual bill is, it would null and void the bill, would it not?
To a certain degree. I mean, the point is that the FISA Act is not set up to spy directly on Americans. It always has been used in context and explained in using it more towards foreign agents like, let's say, Al-Qaeda or other terrorist organizations as deemed by the government. So it's really always been used for that. However, there are cases, and this is going through the courts at this moment, there are many cases where American citizens have been spied on and have attempted to bring it to the court and attempted to get some sort of retribution, but really they've been unsuccessful so far.
All right, and that's definitely where I want to go with this afterwards, because I want to know how it's affecting regular American citizens and impacting their life and making sure we have a full understanding about this situation. You're listening to the Nilon Report, and we're going to be right back after we thank our wonderful sponsors for sponsoring not only this program, but this entire radio station, all on WSRQ.
SRQ, the voice of Sarasota.
Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to the Nilon Report. My name's Susan Nilon in the studio WSRQ, and I got to take a moment and let you know, I want to ask, are you struggling financially? Are you trying to avoid bankruptcy? Attorney Amy Kenyon has worked with the collection industry for over 10 years. She's been practicing as a consumer law attorney in Florida for the last 3 of those 10 years. And she may be able to help you settle your financial problems. Contact her at 941-225-2616 to avoid the cookie cutter plan and have the financial recovery plan specifically tailored to your situation. All right, everyone, we're back talking about warrantless wiretapping. I'm in the studio with Yaël Ossowski. He is the Florida Bureau Chief for the Florida Watchdog organization. And Yaël, I want to let you take a moment and tell me exactly what Florida Watchdog is.
All right, sure. Florida Watchdog is but one of many sites. We are connected to watchdog.org. We're a national news organization. We're based in 40 different states. I have colleagues that do exactly what I do, hopefully. I hope they're doing their jobs in other states, from California to Nevada to Virginia to Montana. And what we're set up to do is to fill that void, that gap in traditional investigative journalism that used to be done at the state and local level. But obviously there's no money there anymore, not much interest, and we're here to try to be the watchdogs and try to keep eye on these folks.
All right, you have a website where you are yourself published on it. Why don't you go ahead and give that out as well?
Sure. Our website is floridawatchdog.org. Everybody can see the articles that we print. We also do have articles in Spanish available for those who would like to read in another language, and we do translate those as well. So we're getting a lot of reporting from Miami to Tampa and now Sarasota. We're all over the state.
And are you just Florida, or are you connected to other agencies in other states?
Just myself, I'm just writing about Florida. However, I have colleagues who are writing all over, and our national website is watchdog.org. And there you can find stories. And really the way that I really like this site is that we see the trends locally. And that allows us to sort of see what's going on nationally, and allows us to really understand how the government is moving, how waste, fraud, and abuse in government is moving, and really what citizens individually can do about it.
Okay, and let's talk about how the government is doing, because you and I were talking about before the show, and when I first saw your article that said Senator Rubio and Senator Nelson have come together and signed a bill, first of all, I went, my heart be still. They're actually working on something together, which is wonderful in an ideal circumstance. But then you got to start to take a look at the bill itself, and you have to start to ask why. And people sometimes in our elected officials, they come together for a variety of reasons. Some because they absolutely love what they're signing, and others because there's a trade-off, there's a negotiation, there's an intimidation. Who knows? Can you give us a little insight about what's going on between our two senators?
Sure. I think a lot of people, they'll be inundated with headlines about gridlock in Washington and the troubles between the Democrats and the Republicans. And at the end of the day, the things that really should caution most of us as individual citizens is the things that don't get talked about in this way. The things that both senators, whether they're Democrat, Republican, or the sole independents out there, the things that they do come together on, because they're things that are almost the most important. Now, we're talking about issues of civil liberties, of war and peace. These are the things that senators usually most of the time will cast aside their differences on and come together. That's why it's so easy to see Marco Rubio and Bill Nelson, who normally are very opposed on all the issues, can come together without debate about warrantless wiretapping. And for them, of course, and for most people in the Senate, it is attached to the ongoing war on terror. That is how, in all the arguments, if you watch it on C-SPAN, cspan.org, I really recommend that every citizen tune in every now and then to see what your government is doing. I get paid to do it, but of course everyone is free to do it as well. In the arguments, that is how this is carried across. It's no mistake that Lindsey Graham, the senator from South Carolina, when he's talking about this bill on the floor, says, look, free speech is a good idea, but we're in a war. And that's sort of the rhetoric that's pushed about when these bills come up for argument and come up to be renewed.
Yeah, and one of the first things it does, it sends up a red flag for me as well, because, I lived for 8 years as an adult during the Bush administration and their manipulation in regard to patriotism. And if you said anything against, any of their advances under the act of patriotism, you were automatically assumed you were anti-patriot and anti-American, and it was really, really tough. The manipulation of the color barcodes, if anybody remembers those, every time a bill was passed, amazing, it went from orange to yellow or whatever the higher color was, just enough, and after it was passed, it dropped back down a little bit after a week or so, and it got to be quite comical. So when we have bills that are entitled Patriot, to me, that's just a marketing effort to get you to almost next to impossible, to oppose this. And so we have Senator Nelson and we have Senator Rubio, and I'm sure whether they agree with this or not, it must go through their head. If they vote this down, they're, unpatriotic.
Yeah, another way that they always sort of push these things through is, do you want power in the party apparatus? A lot of people who are going to start questioning this stuff, like Senator Rand Paul, they're going to have questions asked of them. There's former Senator Chuck Hagel, who apparently is now going to be nominated to be Secretary of Defense as long as his nomination and I believe his whole thing goes through the Senate. He had some questions about things that were going on in Israel, or he had some questions about the war on terror or sending more troops to Iraq. And these small questions mean that he was basically pushed out of his party, and he's pushed out of, really furthering his cause and his political beliefs within the small I would say, mainstream of the Republican Party nowadays. For him, he's not allowed to continue in that. Therefore, it's really no wonder that he's being picked by Barack Obama to fill this role.
Sure, and there's actually quite a few people that we can mention without thinking about it, of people who got pushed out of the mainstream Republican Party. Even though I think the pendulum was starting to swing back the other way, because I believe that the moderates are the ones who prevail in the long run. It's just we get a little sidetracked. But not necessarily to go there, but go back to my statement about Nelson and Rubio. Have they made any statements at all on why they put forth this bill?
No, really. I tried to contact both of their offices, and both of their press people and their press communications people are just saying that this is for the protection of Americans. No, really, they're not really answering to any other questions about civil liberties concerns or anything. For them, it's more about trying to continue the fight against terror and continue the fight and to give the correct tools of power. That's a very important word that's used in these Senate debates. If anybody's watching C-SPAN, these bills that are passed constantly to help the government fight the war on terror, as they say, these are tools. These are mechanisms of law that allow them to do things they normally would not be able to do, such as listen in on phone calls without a warrant, without judicial oversight.
Okay, and let's talk about that as well. Let's take it a step back and talk about why we used to have a warrant issued in a bill like this, why it's important, and why there's a need, at least I feel, to have it put back in. Do you want to go into talking about what the mindset of having a warrant in there?
Yeah, sure. This goes back, as all Americans know, right back to the Revolution. This is one of the reasons, if you read the Declaration of Independence, that the entire war was fought, in that you had the redcoats, the king's army, coming in and ransacking people's homes with absolutely no probable cause, no reason to be there, just because they believe that perhaps they were rebelling against the colonial empire at that time. And how this has come about, especially with this bill, is that you need some sort of proof, some sort of reason, some sort of probable cause that someone is committing a crime. It's the same way you have to think about it, the difference between reasonable suspicion and probable cause. If you're pulled over by a police officer, he cannot just out and out search your car outright. There must be some sort of probable cause present. He must believe that you are in the act of committing some crime before he is able to search your car. And to bring it to wiretapping, the government has to have some sort of reason to believe that you are a terrorist or you are a criminal. Now, this is used for terrorist purposes, but there are many different cases and many different instances, and I really direct people to the internet and to do a little bit more research on the individual Supreme Court cases that have come about because the government thought someone perhaps had connections to foreign powers when in the end they were just convicted of bribery or convicted of this conspiracy charge that is thrown out. So it's always about the government having proof. The burden is always supposed to be on the government to provide some sort of evidence that they can look at your emails or listen to your phone calls, or actually now in this digital age, read your texts and go your Twitter account and see private stuff. It's everything. It's far-reaching. Yeah,
and I think determining what that probable cause is key. Because, I can sit there and say, if I listen in on somebody's conversation, through wiretapping, I'm going to say, absolutely, I have probable cause. I suspect this, this, and this. I've seen him do this, this, and this. And that's great. And that's essentially what the government is saying. They're doing their own checks and balances. And the scary part is that they'll rewrite the rules to fit whatever need that is. When you have a party that's outside, a judge who's not involved in the case, who doesn't have a lot of things riding on it, who's able to sit there and say, yes, you do have probable cause, or no, you don't. Not only is it important to have that third eye looking at it, but in the life of a case that is being brought up against a criminal, you also want that there too. Which is, would lead into another topic that I'm always also concerned about is indefinite internment. That, it kind of leads from this. But I'm not going to go there because I see my break signal coming up. But you want that. You want those checks and balances for a numerous amount of reasons. You don't want to give somebody carte blanche. I'll let you comment on that.
Well, I think for us, what we're sort of seeing is that you've seen a meshing of the executive, legislative, and judicial branch in a way that is unprecedented. The amount of power that the government has now, to even looking at what you check out at the library, is now under government form. And this is something that is not only put into law, but it's embedded into the culture. We have shows like Homeland, which deal with the repercussions of a surveillance state. We have different shows like Scandal, which talk about NSA wiretapping. What we're seeing now is just almost an acceptance.
Absolutely. It has now become mainstream and not such a big deal anymore. And we glamorize it and don't recognize what's happening to our personal liberties. We're going to continue on with this conversation with Yaël. So I'm sorry. I'm always focused on your first name. Ossowski from Florida Watchdog. He's the Florida Bureau Chief. And when we come back, also, we're going to be doing some ticket giveaways. So stay tuned on the Nilon Report, WSRQ Radio. Also online at SarasotaTalkRadio.com. Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to the Nilon Report. And before we go back to our guest, I want to let everybody know once again that we are going to be broadcasting the East-West Shriners game January 19th, 4 o'clock kickoff. Ian Dooley and Deuce are coming back because they're going to be doing the pregame show. And it's really cool because the pregame show that's on our radio station now is actually going to be broadcast nationally. I'm really excited for them. It's a great opportunity. Okay, with me right now is Yaël Ossowski, and he is the Florida Bureau Chief of the Florida Watchdog Organization. And I thank you once again for coming. Actually, you came down from St. Pete, and I appreciate that as well.
Well, thank you very much. It's quite sunny here, so obviously, the burden was not on me to come here.
Well, yeah, I had to say St. Pete is just as beautiful, but thank you anyway. All right, we're talking about warrantless wiretapping. And what I wanted to do, too, is bring it back to the street level, if you will, of how it affects the individual citizen. Because while we can all get on the bandwagon that says, those horrible terrorists out there that are coming to get us, and I know I have people probably going, what is she doing? But I understand protecting our from terrorism. I do. However, this law, it just doesn't target terrorists. And if you can bring it back down to how it affects everyday people as well, I'd appreciate that.
I think for most people who are listening and most people who use a telephone, go on the internet, use your Google search, go on Twitter, you are putting out a lot of information. And it is no secret that the NSA has for a long time tried to collect this information. Now, I have to go back to 2005. This is when the first case was sort of blown wide open by the New York Times. In Everyman, I believe, I forget his name exactly, but he was a professor in a small town, figured that he was at some point being surveilled by the NSA, and he filed a brief and went to court. And in the end, they said, well, you're not allowed to basically sue because you cannot prove that you're being surveilled by the government, and we can't tell you if you're being surveilled by the government. Now, this is something that, it's ongoing. What does that really mean for you and me every day? Now, the argument that's always thrown out is, well, if you're not doing anything bad, then obviously the government has no reason to go after you. But people get caught up in this stuff all the time. Anything can be viewed as suspicious. That's the entire point. And now, the system of laws that we have now, as you were saying earlier, is very adequate. And we have the so-called tools to deal with this. But as an everyday person, it means that the government, if somehow they catch whim of an email you sent or some phone call conversation where you're saying funny things, which I assume to be most phone calls, there is a chance that they could be listening in. And this is not just me talking. It's not a conspiratorial thing. This is Supreme Court cases and Supreme Court judgments that have come down and say, well, there must be some sort of proof. There has to be some sort of tie to a foreign agent or some sort of foreign power. But that's normally only once it gets to the Supreme Court level, which, as we know, takes years.
A lot of it is just evidence gathering.
Yes.
There was a case maybe a decade ago where it was a neighborhood association that was meeting, and one of the members of this neighborhood association had the exact same name of somebody else, a terrorist that they were following. And it was his misfortune that his name was associated. The feds caught wind of it and not only surveyed him, but everybody else in the group, to the point where they actually infiltrated the group because a whole bunch of misinformation had gotten thrown into it. And it was just assumed that it was a terrorist group that was under the guise of a neighborhood association. And so all these citizens that were truly there as an innocent party were subjected to this for over a long period of time. And I don't remember the exact same name of it, but that's what I'm talking about here. It's not just a question of if you've done something wrong, then, you're kind of asking for it. You could have the wrong name, or you could be in the wrong place. I mean, how many mistaken identities are caught up, or stolen identities as well? The burden of proof is on you. And like you said, when you challenge it, you can't do it. The Supreme Court doesn't recognize it.
And there are a lot of other examples that were brought up, I believe, in a great showcase fashion by This American Life. It's a great radio show out in Chicago. And it's about the FBI. And the FBI uses sting operations to go after what they brandish as a terrorist. Now, these people, as it goes, is that they plant somebody who either is some sort of informant, or somebody who's paroled, or someone who basically is a government agent or acting, in power of the government, infiltrates some group. The perfect example was in California. It was just a group of bodybuilders who just really liked video games. They happened to be Muslim. This guy infiltrated the group for over a year. They listened in on all the phone conversations using this warrantless wiretapping program, hoping to find some sort of connection to some sort of terrorist group. They found nothing in the end at all. All they did was they invaded these people's privacy for over a year. And this guy, as a result of his investigation into this group, and because he was working at the control of the government, he basically got a reduced sentence. So you're almost creating the incentive for people to go and spy on their neighbors, or for people to go out and try to infiltrate groups that probably have done nothing wrong.
Well, all right. So now we're here for another 5 years.
Yes, this bill will be in play until 2017. So hopefully we won't be having this conversation in 2018, but we'll see how it goes.
How do we know that? And this is why I think it's important that you and I are talking about these things, because the audience is listening going, it's another 5 years from now. I'm not going to worry about it now because there's nothing I could do. So what happens? Another 5 years goes by. Christmas Eve comes along. They quickly sign a bill. It's put through. And it's another 10 years. It's another 15 years.
Well, the greatest danger is that it is just codified into law, and it is just thought that it is part of the American system forever. I think most people have a view of the United States of America as a republic that is free, that allows people to live free and have their own lives and not worry about the burden of government coming down on them and trying to spy. And we're supposed to be innocent until we're proven guilty by a court of law, not people sitting around in a room listening to our conversations or our arguments with our wives or girlfriends.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think of cases with John Lennon or other people who had FBI files, J. Edgar Hoover, who was paranoid about everyone. And you can go into a room full of evidence files on someone like John Lennon because they thought he was a spy and they thought he was a subversive.
And there's so many cases, just to the opposite, of people who are persons of interest, like Umar Matalab, who was the Christmas Day bomber, who was led onto the plane in Amsterdam. Now, that was revealed in early reports, not really any following up, but it became sort of the perfect push to get TSA to ask us to take our shoes off and to have more and more of an increased government security presence in all of our airports. And now, oh, great, we have a $50 million contract to buy these Rapiscam surveillance systems and to look at us while we try to process our things at the TSA gate. There are always things like this that are happening, and there has to be some sort of scrutiny. And that's really what we're trying to do at Florida Watchdog, at watchdog.org. Hopefully your listeners as well will try to do more to contact your congressmen and senators. It's not all a lost cause. In Florida, we did have just a few of our representatives here. This was passed by the House in September, passed by the Senate in December, and we had a few. Now, not some that our conservative friends would really like, but you had Debbie Wasserman Schultz, Federica Wilson, and Alcee Hastings, who all did vote against it. Now, is it because it was a Republican bill? That I don't know. I can't speculate. They didn't really respond to me when I asked why they voted against it, but it does goes to show that perhaps constituents are holding these people to account.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to take another break, and when we come back, we're going to continue our conversation and find out more what's coming down the line for Florida Watchdog. I'd like to find out what other issues that you're looking at, what other bills you're paying attention to, and if there's any of our representatives who need our audience to be a little bit more aware of what they're doing. You're listening to the Nilon Report, and I want to remind you that not only can you listen to us in the car, but you can listen to us online and also on your smartphone. Both you'll find instructions to do that at SarasotaTalkRadio.com, or just go over to Google, to the Google Store, and type in WSRQ Radio, and it'll be downloaded on your smartphone today. We'll be right back after these messages.
Starting from zero, got nothing to lose. Maybe we'll make something. Me, myself, I got...
Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to the Nilon Report. My name's Susan Nilon in the studio of WSRQ Radio. And I got to tell you, we got a good week coming up as well. Tomorrow we have Kathy Antunes. She's our local political watchdog. She's going to be in to give us some information of a developing story of what happened with Bob Wechter and his recent arrest. As of today, he has stepped down, or has been asked to step down from several boards that he is actually on. We're going to talk about that. A follow-up. She wrote a very good letter to our commissioners asking their position on Mr. Wechter. We're going to let her speak for herself tomorrow. On Thursday, Caroline Chambliss will be in from ITN Sarasota. They're a nonprofit organization that helps provide low-cost travel expenses, transportation vehicles to people who can't afford taxis or need a little bit more personal service. And then Friday, Tia Meir and Cheryl Ramos are event coordinators for Transition Florida. They had their first annual permaculture convergence on event this Saturday. We're going to talk to them. And I believe also a little bit to the Florida Lottery. I want to find out some questions about our Bright Futures scholarships. You're here today with me, and I'm sitting in with Yaël Ossowski. He is the Florida Bureau Chief of Florida Watchdog. And Yaël, I thank you for coming down today. It's been a pleasure having you in the studio.
Thank you very much. It's not every day that we can speak about these issues openly. Thank you for letting me borrow your audience there for a little bit and bidding ears.
Well, one of the things that we were talking about over the break, and I kind of alluded to it before the break, is what else you guys are paying attention to. And one of the things that stuck out for me was these bills that we just signed in particular, Walt Disney World.
So we have this fiscal cliff bill, and all the cable television shows are tuning in to what's going to happen. You have this little box that goes on. I believe it was New Year's, day before New Year's. You have a huge box on your television showing them right now in the House chamber voting on it and hoping to scap together a deal. They're going to work together to put a plan. Well, they did work together to put a plan. And I, unlike most reporters in Washington and throughout the country, actually read the bill. And reading it, you see that not much was done. They really didn't work that hard. If you actually read it, all it does is it takes the last bill that was passed and just extends all the programs. So instead of expiring in 2012, it will expire December 31st, 2013. And among those is a nice little thing that they like to call the Hollywood credit, or as I like to call it, the Mickey Mouse credit. Now, Walt Disney Corporation, or company, as you can call it, is one of the largest media conglomerates in the country, and they secure a great share of the market. If you're a child, if you're an adult, if you go to theme parks, if you watch Marvel comic movies, you are part of the Disney umbrella. And contained within this fiscal cliff bill was another tax, I would say a tax scheme, as they would call it over there in Britain, yet another tax credit, giving Disney $200 million to continue production of their shows on television and to continue putting out their name on their broadcast networks.
So here we are all worried about going over the fiscal cliff, and we're worried about tax and spending. I mean, actually not taxing, but spending. And, to me, a tax break, a tax cut, a tax loophole is essentially more spending. It's just more spending in a very creative, way that with a pretty package. So how does one justify when we're looking at they were threatening to cut Medicare, they're threatening to cut Social Security, and they're threatening to cut programs that are so dependent by so many people, and yet we give someone like the Disney Corporation, who is a mega media conglomerate. I mean, actually, I think they're actually bigger than Rupert Murdoch, if I last recall the amount of companies they own, that they get this break in Florida.
Now, last year, Walt Disney Company made over $40 billion. Mm-hmm. And if you read through their financial statements, and, as a big public company, they are very open with their finances, and you can see how much in subsidies they do receive and how much they receive from federal, state, and local governments. Now, Orange County obviously has been spending a great deal of this money, but the state government and the federal government has chipped in a little bit as well. And it's not just to pick on Disney. Disney is just one example of the many included within this bill. Now, in my hometown of Charlotte, North Carolina, I used to do a lot of reporting on NASCAR. And within this bill, of course, is an extension of even more tax breaks to those who wish to build a new racetrack. And that's ongoing. That's been ongoing now for about 10 years. It's contained within the fiscal cliff bill, among many others. This is, at the whole, what we as an organization attempt to investigate, and that is crony capitalism, corporate welfare, whatever you want to call it. This is one thing that the American public should be attuned to.
Well, and I think it's really fine to say that as well, but as I've witnessed in our own community, while it's good for everybody else to tighten their belts, I still need that money for my rowing facility, or I still need that money for Disney, or whatever project that's near and dear to my heart. Don't cut that. Just cut everything else and it'll be fine. And I think that's what everybody knows. That's why there's no reform in this regard. It's like what you said during the break, is that these representatives, these senators that come back and say, you need to reelect me because look at all the wonderful things I brought for my community.
That's very true. And we always like to pin it on the politicians. That's something that a lot of people always try to do. Well, that's a problem in Washington. They keep doing this on and on, spending our money. But the point is that almost 97% of these people are reelected every year.
Every time. And this one in particular.
And it's something that the people just have to sort of awake to, and they have to be more critical. And that's sort of what we're trying to do, just trying to provide people with the ammunition of information, and hopefully they can become informed and educated and be more active in their communities.
Now, where is Florida Watchdog housed? What part of the state are you in? Tallahassee?
No, I'm officially in St. Petersburg. I will be doing a lot more State House reporting once the session starts up in March. But we also have a reporter in Miami. Her name is Marianela Toledo. She writes all the stories in Spanish. I do the translations. We put them on our website, and we have actually news partners all over the state, television stations, radio stations such as this one, newspapers as well that reprint our articles, which are free. Anybody can go on our website, floridawatchdog.org, and read our articles and see our work. We're trying to get the message across, and if you're down there in Miami, Marianela would be very willing to show you the type of work that we're doing. We're trying to, we're only 19 million people in this state of Florida. And yet there are not that many legislators to keep an eye on, and somehow they seem to run rampant and run on their own.
Really? I haven't been paying attention.
Very true.
Well, I appreciate you bringing this in, and I hope that we can continue these talks further, because I think it's really important. And as you had said, the media isn't covering this stuff. And while I know in a technical sense I'm a part of the media, I feel it's my responsibility to deal with these issues, irregardless of what the mainstream media is looking at. And I know my listeners are very educated and very passionate about our community. And I think it's important that we always bring it home and say, yeah, I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's Barack Obama. I don't care if it's Senator Bill Nelson. I don't care if it's Marco Rubio or whoever you voted for because you helped put them in office. Just because you help get them there doesn't mean that you should wash your hands of being responsible and helping them be responsible for what they do in representation of you. It's
always the principle that matters. It's not the party. I think that's something that our organization always tries to push out there, is that whatever party you're cheerleading for, left or right, whatever it comes down to, there are always American principles that everyone should at least adhere to. And when we see things like this happening, just small examples like we're talking about today, that is enough to get people upset, to get people active, get people out there, and maybe, hopefully, change the world a little bit.
Well, and this is a dynamic change of our Constitution. This is... There are some things that are ambiguous when people say, it's the Constitution, we're destroying it, we're tearing apart. And there's some people who can say, well, I don't know so much. Something like this is just, a blatant misuse of our constitutional rights.
That's the whole point, is that the Constitution as it is written is one of the shortest founding documents ever in the history of the world. But if you have to look at the Federal Register now, at all the things that nullify parts of the Constitution, I mean, it would take you 5 years to read the entire thing.
Absolutely. And I want the opportunity that if something goes wrong, I want representation. I want it not from my congressman. I want it from my attorney. And if my attorney doesn't have the right to protect me from whatever wrongdoing occurs or that I feel occurs, then there's something wrong with the system as well.
It's ongoing. It's something that there are always supposed to be these core principles, and this is the Fourth Amendment that we've been talking about this hour. And it's something that we now in the 21st century are almost revisiting. And the more that they put out these loopholes and the more they put it out, well, at the end, we're just going to have to continue fighting on.
So any other stories that you're going to be following in the future?
We're going to have to be looking at these committees. Now, many of you know that our session here in the state of Florida does not start until March, but these committee hearings have been ongoing. There have been a lot of internet sales tax bills that have been proposed, and we've been trying to look into that a little bit more. And most of the bills that will be introduced in the session have already been written. So we'll be trying to follow that.
Another scary thing as well. Thank you, Yaël, for coming in. I really appreciate it. And everybody else, I appreciate you hanging in with us for this hour. These are important things. I'm grateful for the opportunity to bring them to your attention. I will be back again tomorrow at 5 with Kathy and Tunis, continuing on at a local level, following our local stories. And well, you've heard the routine. We'll be back tomorrow at 5. Have a safe drive home. And I will talk to you. Dennis Miller is coming up next on WSRQ.